I went into this episode thinking that maybe the film LA Story is to the West Coast what the film Annie Hall is to New York City. Is that a valid comparison? Stay tuned for that. But first, my personal journey with these two places. I always loved New York City. It's an exciting, electric, cultural place full of fascinating people and places. And I even thought that I could live there, especially since I wanted to get into the publishing business at one point, and that's where the heart of the publishing business was. I had a lot of family there, although I'm a native Californian, and despite what Double Indemnity says, not all native Californians come from Iowa. As I got closer to finishing my BA degree in English, I would pore over the classified ads from the New York Times Sunday editions. Remember classified ads? Help wanted ads? That's how we used to look for jobs back in the late 70s and early 80s and beyond, I guess. I was so excited because I would see ads that asked for editors or editorial assistants, and some ads even asked specifically for English majors. I thought, wow, there's nothing like that in the LA Times, so New York must be the place for me to go. And so that's what I did. I moved to New York. First, I spent a year in the publishing business in California and figured I'd get my experience there, something to put on my resume. And then I moved to New York thanks to two wonderful cousins who let me stay with them. And almost every day I would walk around Manhattan with the briefcase in one hand and a bunch of help wanted ads in the other hand and a bunch of change in my pockets, and I would walk around and stop at payphones and follow up on interviews and make appointments for interviews because there were no cell phones in the 80s and 90s. And I did get some part-time work here and there, but nothing really came along that was something I wanted to do. And honestly, after several months, New York City kicked my butt. I mean, that song about if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, there's a lot of truth to that because it is not an easy place to make it. So 6 months later, I went back to LA, somewhat dejected, somewhat depressed. And, I still love New York. I hadn't been there in a long time. The last time I was there was 1 month after 9/11 for a family event. And we went down to Ground Zero, and that was unforgettable for many reasons. I even had an uncle who used to work in the World Trade Center way before 9/11 happened. And I'd definitely love to go back to New York. I will go back there one day. As for LA, well, it's an easier lifestyle. It's less intimidating. It's also, I think, less interesting than New York. It doesn't have that electricity or that buzz of something always happening. But I've always found more opportunity in LA and in publishing, and then later on in my main career, which was teaching high school English, which I did for over 30 years. So even though I've always lived in the suburbs of LA and not really in the city proper, I did work in the publishing business for 3 years in Hollywood, and that's when I really got to know LA, the restaurants, the landmarks, the feel of the place, the different oddities of LA, and I really got to know it well. So the bottom line is, LA, that's my home. I hadn't seen the film LA Story since it first came out in 1991, so I was kind of braced to dislike it, and I assumed it would be full of LA stereotypes, and I was feeling a little bit defensive when I sat down last night to watch it. And well, here's what happened. But first, let me say, this is the Kazdoy Closet. I'm Kazdoy. This is my closet full of all the stuff that I love, and today we look at the film LA Story 30 years later. Is it the West Coast version of Annie Hall? Is it a slam against LA? Let's check it out. So the film is, of course, LA Story. It's from 1991. It's 98 minutes long in color. And it's basically about Steve Martin. He's the star, and he's sort of a wacky TV weatherman, and he's looking for true love in the City of Angels. And it's about various relationships he has. And then he's helped in this pursuit by a electronic freeway sign that are up on the freeway, on the side of the freeway, that tell you what the traffic conditions are, or remind you not to drink and drive, stuff like that. He starts getting these cryptic messages guiding him toward the love of his life. So Steve Martin in the lead, he's very good. He also wrote the script. Mary Lou Henner plays one of his girlfriends, and Victoria Tennant is the woman that he's really pursuing. And Sarah Jessica Parker, she is really good in this. She almost steals the film. She's kind of like a Valley girl, but not really. But she's much younger than the Steve Martin character, and she's always twirling around or jumping on his back when he's walking, or she's hopping around, constantly chewing gum. She's like a ball of energy, and she's very funny in this film. There are also a few cameos that I think were uncredited from Woody Harrelson, Rick Moranis, and Patrick Stewart. The director was Mick Jackson, who's made several films. I think he made My Bodyguard. He made the film Temple Grandin. I think he was an odd choice for this because he's British, but aside from that, he was pretty unfamiliar with LA. In fact, I think he said he'd only been to LA once before he made this film. And that to me was kind of a strange choice, especially when you compare that to Woody Allen making the film Annie Hall. He was born and raised in New York. He knows New York like the back of his hand. He is New York. So much more appropriate choice for that film, I thought. So there's a lot of LA jokes in here that are pretty funny. One's about the weather. At one point it turns 58 degrees, and Steve Martin, as the weatherman, is interviewing people, asking them how they're coping with this freezing weather. And that's really true. If it gets below like 60 degrees or 50 degrees in LA, people are wearing sweaters and long pants and stuff, and they're cold. And back east, of course, that's warm. There's also a joke about the culture of LA. Victoria Tennant's from England, and so Steve Martin says he's going to take her on a cultural tour of LA, and she says, "Oh, that'll take about 10 minutes." There's some truth to that, I guess. Also, when he's taking her on the tour, he shows some of the buildings, and he says, "Some of these buildings are 20 years old," which is hilarious because, unfortunately, LA has a habit of getting rid of some of the really nice historic buildings. I think they're doing that less nowadays, but it's really sad that they do that. There's also some jokes about California cuisine where people are staring at their plates and there's barely any food on it, and it's very artfully displayed on their plate. And then early in the film, about 10 of the characters are sitting in a restaurant eating dinner, and there's an earthquake, and none of them even react to the earthquake. It's just like such a ho-hum commonplace thing. Everything's shaking, and they just keep on eating and talking, and that's kind of funny too. There's also some jokes about traffic, and even some jokes about freeway shootings. But overall, I think this is really like a love letter to LA. The jokes aren't mean-spirited at all, and it makes LA, a lot of it, look very magical, very romantic, the way they shoot the skyline and the lights at night, and they use some different effects for flowers blooming in fast motion, and the lights on the freeway, the different effects they use. So it actually looks like a magical sort of place where dreams can happen. So how does LA Story compare to Annie Hall? Well, it's not really a great comparison, to be honest. Both films have real-life couples. Steve Martin and Victoria Tennant were a couple when they made this film. Woody Allen and Diane Keaton were a couple, I think, during the making of Annie Hall. If not during the making of, then at least before it. Annie Hall, I think, is a superior film by far. That's a 5-star film. It's funnier, it's sharper, it has better lines, better jokes. Some of the jokes in LA Story fall kind of flat and are kind of silly. Annie Hall is more resonant. I think it has more interesting observations about relationships. And I think, interestingly, Annie Hall is very sarcastic about making fun of LA, whereas LA Story doesn't mention New York at all. So LA Story is a much milder film, put it that way. So I'm going to give this one a rating of 3.5 palm trees out of 5. It's pleasant. If you like LA, you live in LA, you've been there, you have a fondness for it or whatever, and you like Steve Martin, I think you're going to like this film. it's a pleasant, fun film to watch. What's on this disc? Well, there's a few extras, deleted scenes. There's a story about the making of it. I think the best extra for me was the location manager takes us to various locations in the present day where the film was shot. They even show you where the freeway sign was that they put up on the side of the freeway. And they tell you the exact location, if those things are still there, like the Ambassador Hotel, which is not there anymore. And but actually, Quentin Tarantino in his film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think he used locations better, LA locations better in that film, and better locations overall in that film compared to this, which is, to compare those two. So where can you see LA Story? The usual things, you can buy it. I think it's like $10 on Amazon right now. And it looks fine, by the way. It looks good. The dialogue was a little lower than some of the other sounds. That kind of bothered me, but otherwise fine. And you can always rent it, and I'm sure your local library will, I'm not sure, but they probably will have it in stock. It's 30 years old at this point. So, LA Story. Hope you like this video. Your own feelings about LA or New York, or LA, New York films. Leave a comment or a suggestion down here. Leave a thumbs up. Don't leave a thumbs down. Subscribe would be great. Share this with your friends and neighbors. Otherwise, thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.